I always appreciate when people tell the challenge of the recovery story as well, how hard it was at various points, because it's never a straight line. It's never easy, right? And so people hearing not just about where they can get, but also the struggle to get there, and that the struggle is absolutely part of it, really, I think, provides a different level of sort of inspiration. There's different types of inspiration, I think.
I'm Hannah Warren, the Mental Health Communications and Advocacy Manager at Metabolic Mind. At the 2024 Bazooki Group Metabolic Psychiatry Retreat, we convened top clinicians, researchers, and individuals with lived experience, those who personally transformed their mental health through metabolic therapies. I had a wonderful conversation with Dr. Matthew Bernstein, a leading metabolic psychiatrist and CEO of Accord, a residential program that provides highly tailored support for patients, helping them implement a broad range of metabolic therapies. He's the perfect person to shed light on Metabolic Mind's THINK+SMART framework, which highlights ketogenic therapy alongside other key interventions for metabolic and mental health, including sleep, move, avoid, rebuild, and track. In this conversation, we take a deep dive into the rebuild category, exploring a range of strategies from breathwork meditation to morning strolls in natural light. As someone who used metabolic therapies to overcome the darkness of bipolar 1 disorder, including psychosis and suicidal ideation, I find so much hope in Dr. Bernstein's approach. His work truly reflects the future of mental health care, one that prioritizes metabolic health, personalized support, and the possibility of full recovery. I hope you enjoyed learning from Dr. Bernstein.
Welcome to Metabolic Mind, a nonprofit initiative of Bazooki Group, transforming the study and treatment of mental disorders by exploring the connection between metabolism and brain health. Thank you for joining us on this journey.
Dr. Matt Bernstein, thanks so much for carving out some time to talk to me today. I'm really excited.
I'm really happy to talk with you.
Yeah, so we just recently launched this new model called THINK+SMART, and I'm really glad that you're going to weigh in and talk a little bit more about interventions that help with the rebuild category of SMART. But before that, I wanted to touch on the therapeutic integration of nutritional ketosis and get an idea of what you think as a clinician in this field about how ketogenic therapy might transform the way that we understand and treat psychiatric conditions.
Well, I hope that it transforms it in a huge way. From what I'm seeing, it's an incredibly powerful intervention to really improve the underlying biology in brain health and therefore mental health. But in addition to that, it's so good for the rest of the body as well, which is something I can't say about the psychiatric medications that I have been prescribing for over 20 years. So it's a treatment that I feel like it's a win-win. And so I really hope that it becomes a much bigger part of all of mental health over the next few years.
Yeah, absolutely. As someone with lived experience, I couldn't agree with you more, because when I took antipsychotic medications, it caused incredible metabolic harm. I put on more than 70 pounds in under 6 months, compared to something like ketogenic therapy that really comes with side benefits instead of side effects and helped improve both my mental and metabolic health. It feels like just such a more life-enhancing form of treatment for so many people. And in my role, I have the privilege of talking to a lot of other people who have experiences that mirror my own. So I couldn't agree with you more about that. When it comes to SMART, I'd love your thoughts on how you view these kind of complementary therapies that people can use alongside ketogenic therapy to really optimize their mental health.
Well, I really think that they're important for a lot of the people who are going to be trying this approach. We know, you know, I know, and the people who have been doing this know that the ketogenic therapy, that intervention itself, is extremely powerful in terms of reversing some of the biology and fixing some of the biology underlying these conditions. But what I also see is that it doesn't always get someone all the way there on its own. That similar to even a medication that I might prescribe that might work for someone, it might reduce some of the symptoms, but there may be a whole host of other issues going on, psychological and social issues, relationship issues that also need to be addressed in order to fully make their way through recovery. So usually it's such an important foundation, and I've seen it just on its own do wonders, but often people are needing to add certain things to enhance and continue their process of recovery.
Absolutely. And, the rebuild category that we're going to be diving to in depth, and things that I do like journaling and meditation, I also feel that they're really powerful in helping me to adhere to ketogenic therapy. It helps me to reinforce kind of the goals that I have and why it's so important to me to continue to live that lifestyle.
Right.
But I think it's interesting too that there's emerging research that not only do these help with frame of mind to adhere to things like ketogenic therapy, but might actually be impacting our biology as well, right? So I'm so excited to talk to you as an expert in this, especially knowing you're doing cutting edge therapies like this at Accord, which is a new inpatient program that really helps guide people through this. So I'd love to hear more about your top interventions in the rebuild category.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we really do try in our program to do a whole package for people all at once, because these really are mutually enhancing. And as you said, they also help people stay on the track as well. So there's really lots of reasons to think about adding these things. And, for some people who might be doing it at home, it may be hard to add all of these things all at the same time. So, I encourage people to think about and talk to their advisors and supporters about what might be the best return on investment for them. Is it that they're highly stressed about a relationship or a work situation? Or are they having issues with their sleep and their circadian rhythms? Are there toxins in their environment or in their food that are dragging them down, even though they might be eating a ketogenic diet that's making ketones, but is it a clean diet? And for some people that can make a huge issue. It might be something around their gut health. So some of the things that I find for people, they're really quick to learn and really have a high return for most people are breathing practices. In general, we try to get people to do some kind of mind-body practice, and that can include a lot of things: breathing, meditation, yoga, etc. But breathing is so easy to access, and it's so powerful. And so even something like learning coherent breathing, which is 5.5 seconds in and 5.5 seconds out, and doing that for 5 minutes twice a day, I find people can learn that very quickly, and it provides huge benefits just on its own right there.
Yeah. Can we do that right now? A little
Sure.
breathing exercise that you do with your patients? I'd love
Sure.
to try it. I mean, I feel like I could use a deep breath doing an interview, it'll be a nice...
Well, actually, I have people download this app called Breathe. So if we wanted to, we could look at that real quickly.
Sure.
Let me see if I can pull it up quickly. And in the Breathe app, there's different types of breathing, but I ask people to pick the coherent breathing, and you set the timers to 5.5 seconds in, 5.5 seconds out. That actually leads to 5.5 breaths per minute. So there's something very symmetrical about that. And from what I'm told, this is something that has been in prayers throughout all of cultures, throughout history, is that timing, that specific cadence. So the way this works is that there's a little flower that goes out when you're inhaling and goes back in when you exhale, and there's a sound that goes along with it. So we can turn up the sound a little bit maybe and hear it better. Yeah. And so we can just do it together. So breathe out.
Yeah, see, just a few deep breaths like that is so relaxing. Breathwork has been a big part of my meditation practice as well. I lived in India for a while, so I'm a big fan of pranayama. But what I found is so often in moments of stress, like it can be such a relief just to take a deep breath.
That's right.
And it sounds so simple, but it really is impactful.
Yeah, it is. It's so, it really affects regulates the nervous system, but it also has effects on metabolism because, oxygen and nutrients are one of the main inputs to the mitochondria for respiration. And then one of the main outputs is carbon dioxide. So we're actually directly affecting things like pH and oxygen desaturation just by slowing down our breathing. So once people know how to do it, as you said, you can just pull it out whenever you're in a situation. You don't need to bring out your phone. Once you know how to do it, you can just take a couple of those breaths that you're used to doing and calm your nervous system down almost immediately.
So I'm curious, at Accord, do you do kind of group sessions with patients where they come together to learn practices like that?
We do, yeah. We try to offer all types of different practices and let people try them in groups, try them on their own, and have people try to gravitate and pick one that they are, feeling is the most resonant for them, and really try to deepen that practice and practice it regularly while they're there.
Mm-hmm. One of the questions I think I have about Rebuild is, everybody's journey is unique. I feel pretty fortunate that by the time I discovered ketogenic therapy, I was pretty well primed for it. I had already, given up negative coping habits like smoking and drinking and started exercising and meditating and doing some fasting. So I was really ready for ketogenic therapy. But I sometimes wonder if I would have found that earlier on in my journey, like from a dark place when, I was still self-medicating and eating terribly, all those different things. If it would have been a gradual process, like when people are starting, do you always recommend that people start right away with ketogenic therapy? Or for some people, does it make sense to start with some other foundation initially and work their way up to that? Or does it vary from person to person?
It really varies. I think some people hear about ketogenic therapy or making ketones and they want to try it right away, and that's great. Some people say that's a lot, I want to ease into it. We may just clean up their diet and start somewhere else. Maybe a breathing practice, maybe it's giving up a bad habit, maybe it's some psychotherapy around trauma that they had and mind-body practices. So, I think people sometimes do need to start at the thing that is going to have some yield and get them going in a positive direction. And then once going in a positive direction, it's easier to add things once you have that momentum.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like people, most importantly, need to come at this with like a sense of patience and self-compassion, that it can be a gradual process, right? Absolutely.
Yeah, I emphasize that a lot because everyone's in a hurry. Some people have lost many years of their life to illness experience. They've gotten disconnected from their social environment, from vocational activities. And once they start feeling like they want to be recovering and they're starting to find some things, they can be in a big hurry and feel like, well, someone else did keto and got better so quickly, and why isn't that happening for me? And that's where the self-compassion comes in. And there's different layers for different people. They may have another layer to go through, or another layer to go through, and there may be more of a search. And that can be frustrating and hard, but hopefully, the inspiration that you're providing on the platform, people's stories, not only does it give hope, but also something about their journey might resonate. And I think people do know deep down sometimes what they need to do. What really is going to be the thing that they need to tackle. And it might not be the thing they can tackle first. They might have to build some momentum to get to that hard thing. But I think people do know what the hard thing often is. And, they need their supporters and they need that inspiration and collaborators to help them through some of those really hard things.
Absolutely. And, everybody's journey is unique. One thing I've heard a lot is from people who felt like ketogenic therapy did give them that basis and stability to work through things like past trauma and do the more difficult work. It was like therapy never really worked for me until I started keto. And that's when I was able to really work through the deeper issues. Have you seen that a lot as well?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, keto's such a wonderful foundation. And it gives people almost universally, more energy, less anxiety, better memory, better, clearer thinking. And that is a foundation with which they can then tackle some of the harder things.
Yeah. So I love the breathing exercises. I'm sure that's really beneficial to a lot of the patients. What are some of the other things that you're doing with people to help them on their journey?
Well, I mean, I'm a huge proponent of exercise, and I have been, even before I knew about the ketogenic diet, I've been trying to get people to exercise. I think the data for that is so strong, but it's also one of the really harder things for people to do who've been struggling for a long time, and especially people who have gained weight on medications or, because of their illness. And so sometimes it's hard to get them to do that. It's just, feels impossible. So an easier thing to do is, and it's sort of a 2-for-1, is get up early in the morning, see the morning sunlight, which really helps set the circadian clock while taking a walk. And I find that intervention, if I can get people to do it, is very, very powerful. We know that the circadian rhythms really orchestrate almost all the functions in the body, especially through hormones. And, it's almost like the metaphor would be, the circadian clock, which is this cluster of nucleus in the hypothalamus called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, is sort of like a conductor. And the body is all the musicians, all the organs. And if the conductor isn't there, conducting, everyone's out of tune, they're out of time. But when it's in harmony, everything's working together and we've got, a beautiful symphony. And so the most powerful way to sort of get that circadian clock attuned is that morning sunlight signal outdoors.
Absolutely. And pairing that with movement, like you said, walking, I feel like is so underestimated.
Oh, yeah.
As, yes, maybe it's not the most vigorous exercise, but just moving your body can be so helpful for your frame of mind throughout the whole day if you start with a morning walk.
Yeah. And it really depends on where someone's starting. For some people, walking is vigorous exercise. And, if we can get them walking, 20, 30 minutes in the morning and then maybe another walk after lunch, that's a lot of exercise, and it's really has an enormous impact. Once someone's doing that a lot, they may need to keep, increasing the volume or intensity. But, for a lot of people, walk is great exercise.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with that more. I also remember, after my first episode, when I started to take medications, prior to that, I had been really into jogging. And I remember when I was taking the medication just so low on energy and facing this deep depression, I no longer felt kind of the runner's high or any motivation to move. It was like I just completely lacked energy that would make me want to exercise. So I feel like that's another way that ketogenic therapy is very complementary to something like that, because you really physically need the energy to be able to tap into that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think, as we said, this really all works together so well. So for someone who doesn't have the energy to exercise, if they do start making some ketones, often, within a week or two, they're out there running, in the gym, in ways that they didn't imagine a few weeks before.
Yeah, exactly. And, now that I've been doing metabolic therapies and as my sole form of treatment for more than 3 years now, jogging is such a great part of my routine again. And like you recommend doing it in the morning. I love going out first thing in the morning for a jog. It's just the best way to start my day and really helps with stress management. So I'm really glad you're integrating that into your program as well.
Yeah.
What are some of the ways that you look at things like purpose and connection and the role that plays for people in recovery?
Well, it's enormous. When people have an illness experience, often, as you know, they get pulled out of their life. They may end up on an inpatient unit. They may have to leave school or leave their job. And getting back to those things can sometimes be almost impossible. They're now on medication. They still have symptoms. And there's this stigma around about, what just happened to this person? What kind of medical leave was that? And a lot of people end up just dropping out of their lives. And we know that meaning and purpose is so important for mental health, but it's also so important for physical health. It really all works together. And so that's one of the bigger ones. So for some people, that's going to be, there's going to be, some biological recovery through the ketogenic diet, maybe through exercise, mindfulness, preparation work that might, need to happen first before someone feels capable of tackling, reintegrating back into life. I also find it's super important for people to have a social network of some sort, a family member, a friend, a therapist, people who are rooting for them, who are collaborating with them, supporting them in getting back into these activities. Because for a lot of people, this is a big barrier. For many, it's been years of being out of their life And the idea of returning back to life can feel almost impossible. And so this is one of the ones for some people, it could be easy. They might just plug themselves back in. But for many people, this is one of the bigger, sort of harder ones that might require a lot of effort and energy and support from others.
Yeah. So what are some of the recommendations that you have for people when they're trying to navigate that complicated path?
Well, I mean, one thing that we always talk about is really gathering that team, like I just talked about, the feeling that you're supported, the feeling that you're out there doing something hard, but you're going to go talk to someone about it, when you're done, or this person helped prepare you to get there. To know that you have that support and connection makes these tasks feel so much more possible. And there's really a lot of good social science research about this, demonstrating that point. And so that is crucial. But the other part is really thinking about just taking small steps. Because, someone may have been, a high-level student or working at a job where they were doing well, and the thing that they need to start with might feel less than what they were doing before. And that's really, can be a challenge. It can feel almost corrosive to progress. This thing that I'm now doing just doesn't feel like what I'm capable of. Or what I know that I'm capable of. But it might be the thing, but then it also feels hard at the same time. And so that's really a bind that people can get in. It's almost like a catch-22. It feels hard, but it's not good enough at the same time. And so sometimes that just requires, again, some therapy and support around, you're going to get to that goal. You're going to get to where you were, but you do have to take one step at a time. And, having the mindfulness practice often, or the journaling practice, can really be helpful to accepting that it is going to be one step at a time, and this is where I have to start.
And that's where I really hope also that success stories and inspiration can play a role in people's recovery, because I've talked to so many other people with lived experience like my own, where you get to a place where you feel like you've really gone through post-traumatic growth, and you're actually you only return to baseline. You're really kind of better off than you would have been if you'd never had to go through this, because once you learn the discipline and the art of following through with all of these practices, that really strengthens your whole life, right? I feel like you get to a place where you're going to be able to approach life with more follow through and a totally different orientation than you would have if you never had to go through something so overwhelmingly difficult.
Absolutely. That's so well said. And I was just thinking, as you were saying that, about when people tell recovery stories, sometimes I hear people say that they feel that, oh, well, I'll never be able to do all that, or why isn't it happening so easy for me, to recover like that? And I think when people tell recovery stories, I always appreciate when people tell the challenge of the recovery story as well, how hard it was at various points, because it's never a straight line. It's never easy, right? And so people hearing not just about where they can get, but also the struggle to get there, and that the struggle is absolutely part of it, really, I think, provides a different level of sort of inspiration. There's different types of inspiration, I think.
Absolutely. And I think that's what makes this particular movement so special in the people with lived experience, because there's this level of compassion, because people have been to those depths of despair, been on the verge of suicide, and found something that's helped them to restore their physical and mental health. And so they want to do everything that they can to raise awareness and help other people, out of that dark place. And I think that's something unique too when it comes to community and purpose. I've even met some people with lived experience who said they didn't really have any family members or close friends who are particularly supportive of this form of treatment. And having this community has allowed them to connect with others. And you find a lot of connection and people who go out of their way to have conversations and uplift one another just, virtually online through this shared passion for metabolic psychiatry, which is really unique and beautiful to watch.
It really is. Yeah. I mean, there's something that can be provided by someone who's been through a very similar experience that, even though I've had struggles in life, I still can't provide quite that in my work. And I always encourage people to make these peer connections. It's so important. And it's really, sometimes I've seen it be the most important aspect of someone's journey, is knowing that there's someone who's been through something similar that they're connecting with, and they get so much energy from that. and it really, fills up the tank for the hard work that needs to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I believe you're doing at Accord as well is that you have some different ways that you're able to show patients actual like biological data and feedback from some of the practices that you're doing. Could you share a little bit about that? I think sometimes feedback, like even something simple like an Oura ring telling me about my sleep quality, can help reinforce kind of positive habits. So I'd love to hear a little bit about those tools you're using.
Absolutely. Yeah. We're measuring a lot of things. Some of it gives, some, every week feedback or every month feedback, but some of it is every 5 minutes. One of my favorite things is the continuous glucose monitor. And these are now available over the counter. And they're easy to access through certain websites. And I really encourage people to think about trying one out. Because this gives immediate feedback about what's going on in metabolism based on not just food, movement, mindfulness, cortisol levels, sleep quality, all of that impacts glucose. And it's sort of like this really single number that's giving us a sense of what's going on inside of our cells. And so that feedback really is helpful. When we see someone's CGM number spiking, we have to figure out, well, what's causing that? And sometimes it could be something that they ate, but interestingly enough, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's stress. I had that same experience myself when I wore a CGM. I was going through a stressful time and my average numbers were higher than I expected. I was getting all of these spikes even from foods that didn't make sense. And I wore one at a different time under less stress, and it was a completely different story. So I really understand the power of that, and I've seen it in individuals as well. In the middle of a conversation that's getting them stressed, we can see it right on their numbers at that moment. But we also have people wearing Garmin watches, so we're seeing heart rate variability, step counts. That's really great immediate feedback as well to get a sense of how much of the movement program people are doing. We actually measure body composition as well. So things like lean body mass and visceral fat, things that are really good reflections of metabolism. And so getting, a better number, 2 weeks into the program or 4 weeks into the program really gives people a boost. They see, I gained some muscle, I lost some visceral fat just from the last couple of weeks of doing the right things. And that really can boost motivation.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's so interesting because, of course, we always think of a CGM and the correlation to food and what we eat, but I don't think people are as used to thinking about lifestyle in this kind of rebuild category. So do you see that sometimes people, when they integrate more restorative practices, things like meditation and yoga, are you seeing a correlation of like a drop in glucose spikes?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So someone's glucose is spiking because they're talking about something stressful. We spend 5 minutes breathing and the glucose comes right back down. So you can see not just it go up from the stress, but go back down from the intervention. So incredibly reinforcing about how powerful and how connected the whole system is.
Absolutely. I think about what you're doing at Accord, and I just see the future of mental health care.
Yeah.
And what I really want is for everybody to have access to this kind of comprehensive inpatient program, especially when someone's been through something acute and traumatic, to be able to figure out how to build a metabolic therapy regime. And there's nothing better than doing it in community, doing it with tools so that you can see data and get that full guidance and support. But I'm wondering, what do you think it's going to take to change the mental health care field and eventually get it to that point where these kind of therapies are accessible to everyone?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I agree 100% that this is just, a small pilot program. And actually, we consider ourselves residential level of care. Inpatient is, in mental health is considered a locked door, very acute hospital setting. We're not a hospital. We're a nice house, but we're providing
that sounds a lot better. Yeah. Thank you for making that clarification.
Yeah. We're providing this nice immersion, sort of comprehensive immersion kind of program, which I do think people really benefit from to get a jump start. All of these different things. There are people who are, incredible self-starters, incredible motivation, who can take your blueprint and, get inspired and add all those things in, do the research and run with it. But unfortunately, that's not true of everyone, and everyone's used to in our culture also things kind of being handed to them, not having to work so hard. we've been trained that way by our medical system and our pharmaceutical industry. So, in the end, it's helpful to have that kind of immersion. But as you said, it's right now expensive. I wish it wasn't. And insurance isn't covering most of it for most people. What will it take for people in the halls of power to decide that we need a better food system, we need an insurance system that would cover this kind of work? It's hard to say, but hopefully we can demonstrate the benefits and also, in the end, economic benefits. Because if we can get someone on a metabolic and lifestyle regimen instead of needing to go inpatient every so often, needing to take very expensive medications every month for the rest of their lives, we're actually saving lots of money, even just from an insurance point of view, not, let alone how much we're gaining from a human perspective when someone gets their life back and how much of a ripple effect that has in their whole family and in generations, really.
Absolutely, especially when you look at people who are treatment resistant, who haven't responded to anything else, and this allows them to get back to work and lead, fully productive lives. It's not even savings in terms of Medicaid, but in terms of full disability support for people. So this really needs to be recognized, the therapeutic potential. And as someone who did have no choice but to do it on my own, I can tell you I much rather would have been in an incredible program like you have at Accord, to be able to do this in community with others and really get the full scientific understanding instead of doing my own research and just learning by trial and error like my own guinea pigs. So I'm really hopeful that in the future we'll see things like this become more accessible, but it's going to be, a marathon, not a sprint, I guess. Right. In terms of advocacy work, it's really important to me that people with lived experience want to play a role in helping to demand, better treatments for people. And I know you went to the Metabolic Revolution rally in Washington, D.C., so that was great to see. And I'm optimistic, that we are coming together at a grassroots level to demand change.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think this is one of those things where it's going to be grassroots on the one hand, and then there's, high level research going on in terms of what the science is showing on the other hand. And I think that combination, ultimately, it can hopefully sort of all meet in the middle, right? That, both of those things are going to be really important in the whole process. But what I found too that's so interesting, and I've been working in mental health a long time, getting referrals for my practice and for the other company I work for, Ellenhorn. Most of those referrals are coming from other clinicians, whereas in metabolic work, most of the people are finding me from things like Metabolic Mind and other podcasts and internet searches. This is grassroots. This is very different. People are not saying, oh, my doctor or my therapist told me to call you. They're saying, I learned about this on my own and I really want to do it. Mm-hmm. And that is incredible. I love that aspect of it.
That's why I think it's so important, like you said, that these things need to happen in tandem with one another, in parallel, because we can't just sit and wait for the science to happen, right? We need to push that. There are people who are desperate to get their lives back right now. They don't want to lose a decade waiting for the science to validate.
Absolutely. I feel very strongly about that, yes, the science is coming. We already have a little bit, but we definitely don't need to wait. We're talking about food. We're talking about a treatment that has been around for over 100 years with demonstrated safety. And we're talking about something that people can do at home. It's so self-empowering. There's no reason why we have to wait for all of the science for people to start integrating these things into their lives. Of course, it's important in terms of dealing with medication that they have someone who's helping advise them around that. I definitely don't want people to just say, I'm just going to stop my medication, because that can lead to its own problems. There's withdrawal syndromes and all types of terrible things that can happen. But, usually if someone's able to do, the lifestyle and diet stuff with advisors, then, often prescribers will get on board. And there's now all types of resources for, psychiatrists and other prescribers to learn about the science for this now. Metabolic Mind's doing incredible work to educate people. So I applaud all of that.
I'm really excited that we do have continued medical education courses available now, thanks partially to your Ellenhorn conference, where we were able to record Dr. Georgia Eid and Dr. Chris Palmer's presentations. So yeah, I think that clinician education component is really critical, because we know not everybody can have the optimal care team right now in terms of metabolic psychiatry. People are lucky if they can even find one advisor, whether it's a dietitian or a therapist or a psychiatrist who understands metabolic therapies. But I think at a bare minimum, if you have your own care team willing to support you through it, and you're willing to be an advocate for yourself and kind of share information that can help them to support you, you need to absolutely have someone monitoring you and helping you through the process to do it safely.
That's right.
There is one more thing I want to ask, actually, which is I believe that part of what you're doing when it comes to eventually making these therapies more accessible is you are gathering scientific data and research from your program, right, that can help to show efficacy and show, demonstrate, in quantitative and qualitative terms, probably what the outcomes are of these therapies for patients.
That's right. Yeah. And it's a great opportunity, because here we are, we're a clinical program first, but we are collecting all of this data as part of the clinical program, as we said, measuring all this stuff around metabolism, but also measuring mental health scales the whole time and seeing what the correlations are. So I've been fortunate to team up with one of the investigators, one of the psychiatrists at McLean Hospital, Virginia Ann Chouinard, who is, we're currently in the process of writing up an IRB so that we can prospectively collect that data and publish not only the results of what can be achieved on an immersive residential program, but also try to see what the correlations are between the various metabolic things that we're measuring and the mental health outcomes in these various conditions. So we're hoping to contribute a little bit to the science, but also just demonstrate the efficacy of what this kind of program can do.
I think it's incredible, because that's exactly what we need if we're going to advance this field. So being able to demonstrate what your program is able to help people accomplish in terms of recovery is going to be absolutely instrumental in helping advance the field. So thank you so much for the critical work that you're doing and for taking the time to talk with me today.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been really a pleasure to talk with you.